Hello and welcome back to the kitchen. My name is Johnny and today I'm going to be sharing with you another one of my favourite plant-based recipes. Healthy food that is kind to the planet and will satisfy even the most committed of carnivores. With a few simple changes in ingredients, you too can have delicious and plant-based muffins at home. The mix is effortless to make and there is no end to the flavour combinations you can create. To get these muffins on the go, all we need are a few store-cupboard staples. The first group of ingredients are our dry ingredients. For this I'm using some plain flour, some caster sugar and some baking powder. Our next group of ingredients are the wet ingredients. For this I'm using some plant-based milk and some vegetable oil. The third and final group of ingredients are our flavorings. In today's muffins I'm going with some dried fruit, some chopped mixed nuts, some ground cinnamon and vanilla bean paste. And that's it, so let's get these muffins going. So our ingredients are all weighed out. The first thing we need to do is preheat the oven to 170 degrees C fan. Then we get ourselves a good sized mixing bowl and a sieve, and we can go in with the dry ingredients. First off we have the plain flour. We'll sieve that into the bowl, and if you were looking to keep this muffin gluten-free, as well as swapping out the oat milk, you could also go for a pre-mixed gluten-free flour blend. Sieve that in, and then we go in with the caster sugar. And finally we go in with the baking powder. Now this does seem like a lot of baking powder, but you have to bear in mind we're not using eggs in this recipe, so all the rise is having to come from the baking powder, and for that reason we need to add a little more than you might usually. And lastly we need to go in with a small pinch of salt. It's often overlooked when people are baking cakes and biscuits, but salt is after all an enhancer of flavour, and even in sweet goods like this, it will just bring out some of those natural flavours that are going on there. So that's the dry ingredients ready, we can sort out the wet. Get yourself a measuring jug, and then we go in with the oat milk. As I said, if you were looking to keep these gluten-free, then obviously opt for a nut or pea-based milk. And then we go in with a third of a cup, or around 80 ml of vegetable oil. I'm using a rapeseed oil, but it doesn't matter what type of vegetable oil you use, as long as it's fairly neutral in flavour so that it doesn't overpower any of the other flavours going on in the muffins. I've lost my spatula, there it is. We'll just give that a little mix, and then we can pour that over the dry ingredients. And then we just want to mix these together. Now as I said before when I was making the vegan chocolate gatto, it's important to only mix this as much as is required to get the ingredients nicely combined. Once this flour gets wet and you stir it, it's going to start forming gluten strands, which means we'll end up with a tougher texture and you'll lose that lovely crumbly feel that we're looking for in this muffin. So that batter's looking nicely combined now, there are no lumps of flour, and it's all mixed together nicely and evenly. So now we can go in with our flavours. Now today I'm going in with some dried fruit and mixed nuts, but once you've got this basic batter down, you can add whatever flavours you like to this and really make it your own. You can go in with some lemon zest and poppy seeds, or some fresh blueberries, or some cocoa powder. So we'll start by going in with the mixed nuts and the dried fruit. And then I'm going to add around half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and half a teaspoon of good quality vanilla extract or vanilla bean paste. And then we just want to gently incorporate these. One of the reasons we add the flavorings at the end is if you were using something like a blueberry or a fresh raspberry, If you put it in at the beginning, by the time you finished mixing it, they would have completely disintegrated. This way, if you're using a softer flavouring or filling like fresh fruit, it's going to keep its shape a lot better. And there we go, we're about ready to put those into the muffin cases. Today I'm using some of these paper tulip style muffin cases to give it that professional coffee shop look. You could also just use a standard cupcake case. It's worth noting, if you are using these tulip style cases, that they're not actually held together at all. And if you were to put the batter into this and put it straight in the oven like this, as the cake expands it would just flatten out. So it's very important to bake these in a deep muffin tray like this. Alternatively, if you didn't want to use the paper cases, you could just grease and line the muffin tray and put the batter into it directly. So that's our muffin cases. Now we just need to divide the mix between them. This batter should make between 6 and 8 muffins, depending on how much filling you've put in. So obviously as you add the fillings it will increase the volume. And we're looking to fill these around 2/3 full. You don't want to go too full because obviously they are going to expand and rise and you don't want them, I guess, muffin topping. Another option, if you're slightly cack-handed like me, is you could put the mix into a piping bag and pipe it evenly into each muffin case. However, because I've got the dry fruit and the nuts, the lumps and the texture make it quite difficult to get through a piping bag. So for these muffins in particular, I'm just going to have to go in by hand and make a mess. So the muffin mix is divided between the cases. I'm just going to have a little tidy up where I've been a bit messy. Otherwise the batter is going to stick to the cases on the outside and we'll have a nightmare getting them out. Right, so these need to go into the preheated oven. And then we're just going to set ourselves a timer for 20 minutes. Which should give us just about enough time to get washed up. I make these muffins weekly at work. They're a real crowd pleaser, and you wouldn't even know they're vegan. The addition of the extra baking powder makes them so light and fluffy you don't even notice the lack of egg. And they freeze really nicely too. If you made a batch up, just let them go completely cold before popping them in the freezer in a Tupperware. All you have to do is take them out around 45 minutes to an hour before you want one, gently warm it through in the oven, and then you've got lovely, fresh, fluffy muffins whenever you fancy. Right, let's see how they're doing. So we'll just pop a clean skewer in. No, I think they're a little ways off. Back in the oven for another 5 minutes. Okay, so these have had another 5 minutes, so let's see how they're doing. Yep, they look about perfect. Depending on the size of the muffin case you're using and the oven you're using at the time, these can take anywhere from 20 to 35 minutes, so it's important to keep checking them and just popping them in at 5-minute intervals if they look a little under. So now we just need to transfer these to a cooling rack. And now the only difficult part is not eating them whilst they're cooling. Okay, so these have had a good 30 minutes to go cool. Let's see how they taste. They look so light and fluffy. They smell wonderful. I've got that lovely gentle spice coming from the ground cinnamon. The dried fruits just give it a nice sweetness, and then that lovely savoury earthiness coming through from the chopped nuts. These make such a lovely kind of mid-morning treat or something to go with some tea in the afternoon. So there you have it. Fruit and nut muffins. Couldn't be any simpler and 100% plant-based. I hope you've enjoyed watching me make these today. and I can't wait to see you again back in the kitchen for another delicious plant-based recipe.